Welcome to Lace Reads, where I cover fictional and true crime stories. If you have a story you would like for me to cover, please message me. In our first story, we will cover the woman that is known as the Giggly Nanny. Let's get started. Nannie Doss, also known as the Giggly Nanny, was a serial killer responsible for the deaths of 11 people between the 1920s and 1954. She finally confessed to the murders in October 1954, when her fifth husband had died in a small hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In all, it was revealed that she had killed 4 husbands, 2 children, her 2 sisters, her mother, a grandson, and a nephew. Early life. Nannie was born in Blue Mountain, Alabama as Nancy Hazel to James and Lou Hazel. Nannie was one of 5 children. She had 1 brother and 3 sisters. Both Nannie and her mother hated James, who was a strict, often controlling father and husband with a nasty streak. There is evidence that Doss was conceived illegitimately, as James and Lou married after 1905. Census records also show that in 1905, she and her mother were living on their own. She had an unhappy childhood. She was a poor student who never learned to read well. Her education was erratic because her father forced his children to work on the family farm instead of attending school. When she was around 7 years old, the family was taking a train to visit relatives in southern Alabama. When the train stopped suddenly, Nannie hit her head on the metal bar on the seat in front of her. For years after, she suffered severe headaches, blackouts, and depression. She blamed these and her mental instability on that accident. During childhood, her favorite hobby was reading her mother's romance magazines and dreaming of her own romantic future. Later, her favorite part was the Lonely Hearts column. The Hazel sisters' teenage years were restricted by their father. He forbade them to wear makeup and attractive clothing. He was trying to prevent them from being molested by men, which happened on several occasions. He also forbade them to go to dances and other social events. Nannie's first marriage. Nannie was first married at age 16 to Charlie Braggs. They had met at the linen thread factory where they both worked, and with their father's approval, they married after dating for just 4 months. He was the only son of his unmarried mother, who insisted on living with them. Nannie later wrote, "I married, as my father wished, in 1921, to a boy I only knew about 4 or 5 months, who had no family, only a mother who was unwed and who had taken over my life completely when we were married. She never seen anything wrong with what he'd done, but she would take spells. She would not let my own mother stay all night." Charlie's mother took up a lot of his attention, and she often prevented Nannie from doing things she wanted to do. The marriage produced 4 daughters over a 4-year period of 1923 to 1927. Under a lot of stress, Nannie started drinking, and her casual smoking habit became a heavy addiction. The marriage was an unhappy one, and both suspected each other, correctly, of infidelity. Charlie often disappeared for days on end. In early 1927, they lost their 2 middle daughters to suspected food poisoning. Suspecting she had killed them, he fled from her, taking eldest daughter Melvina with him and leaving newborn Florine behind. His mother also died around this time. Nannie took a job in a cotton mill to support Florine and herself. Charlie returned in the summer of 1928. With him and Melvina was another woman, a divorcee with her own child. Nannie and Charlie soon divorced, and she returned to her mother's home, taking her 2 daughters with her. Charlie always maintained he left her because he was frightened of her. Nannie's second marriage. Living and working in Anniston, Nannie soothed her loneliness by reading true romance and other such reading matter. She also resumed poring over the Lonely Hearts column and wrote to men advertising there. A particular advert that interested her was that of Robert Harrelson, a 23-year-old factory worker from Jacksonville. He sent her romantic poetry, and she sent him a cake. They met and married in 1929 when she was 24, 2 years after her divorce from Charlie. They lived together in Jacksonville with Nannie's 2 surviving daughters. After a few months, she discovered that he was alcoholic and had a criminal record for assault. Despite this, the marriage lasted 16 years. Nannie's grandchildren. Melvina, Nannie's oldest daughter, gave birth to Robert Lee Haynes in 1943. Nannie came to help, and after a painful few hours, a baby boy was born, but died soon after. Melvina, exhausted from labor and groggy from ether, thought she saw Nannie stick a hat pin into the baby's head, and later told Mosey and Florine. They told her how Nannie had said the baby was dead, and they noticed she was holding a pin. However, the doctors could not come up with an explanation for the death. After this, Melvina and Mosey drifted apart, and Melvina began to date a soldier. Nannie disapproved of him, and while Melvina was visiting her father after a particularly nasty fight with Nannie, her son Robert died mysteriously under Nannie's care on July 7, 1945. The cause of the death was diagnosed as asphyxia from unknown causes, and 2 months later she collected the $500 life insurance she had taken out on Robert. Death of Frank. In 1945, Japan surrendered to the Allied powers at the end of World War II, and Harrelson, Nannie's second husband, was one of the many people who celebrated rather robustly. After an evening of particularly heavy drinking, he raped Nannie. The following day, as she was tending her rose garden, Nannie discovered Harrelson's corn whiskey jar buried in the ground. The rape had been the last straw for her, so she took the jar and topped it off with rat poison. Harrelson died a painful death that evening. Nannie's third marriage. Nannie met her third husband whilst traveling in Lexington, North Carolina. He was Arlie Lanning, and she married him within 3 days of meeting him through another Lonely Hearts column. Lanning was in many ways like his predecessor, Harrelson. He was an alcoholic and a womanizer. However, in this marriage, it was Nannie who often disappeared for months on end. When she was at home, however, she played a doting housewife, and when her husband died of what was said to be heart failure, the whole town turned up to his funeral in support of her. Afterwards, the house the couple lived in burned to the ground. It had been left to Lanning's sister, and had it survived, it would have gone to her. As it happened, the insurance money went to Nannie, and she quickly banked it. She soon left North Carolina, but only after Lanning's elderly mother had died in her sleep. She ended up at her sister Dubby's home. Dubby was bedridden, and soon after Nannie's arrival, she died. Nannie's fourth marriage. Nannie had joined the Diamond Circle Club, looking for another husband. She had met Richard L. Morton of Emporia, Kansas. While he did not have the drinking problem of his predecessors, he was a womanizer. Before she could poison him, she ended up poisoning her mother, Louisa, on January 1953, when she came to live with them. Morton met his death 3 months later. Nannie's fifth marriage. Nannie met and married Samuel Doss of Tulsa, Oklahoma, in June 1953. A clean-cut, church-going man, he disapproved of the romance novels and stories that Nannie adored. In September, Samuel was admitted to the hospital with flu-like symptoms. The hospital diagnosed a severe digestive tract infection. He was treated and released on October 5. Nannie killed him that evening in her rush to collect the 2 life insurance policies she had taken out on him. This sudden death alerted his doctor, who ordered an autopsy. The autopsy revealed a huge amount of arsenic in his system. Nannie was promptly arrested. Confession and conviction. Nannie confessed to killing 4 of her husbands, her mother, her sister Debbie, her grandson Robert, and her mother-in-law, Arlie Lanning's mother. The state of Oklahoma centered its case only on Samuel Doss. The prosecution found her mentally fit for trial. Nannie pleaded guilty on May 17, 1955, and was sentenced to life imprisonment. The state did not pursue the death penalty due to her gender. Nannie was never charged with the other deaths. She died of leukemia in the hospital ward of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in 1965. Our next story covers a malicious landlord from California. Let's take a 15-minute silence break, and we'll start our next story. Dorthea Puente is a convicted serial killer. She was born in San Bernardino County, California, to two alcoholics. Her father was a cotton picker. Both parents abused her, and she often had to scavenge for food. Dorthea's father died when she was 4. When she was 6, her mother died, so she was sent to an orphanage until relatives from Fresno, California took her in. In later life, she lied about her childhood, saying that she was one of 18 children who all were born and raised in Mexico. In 1946, she married for the first time, but her husband died of a heart attack within 2 years. For money, she tried to forge checks, but she was eventually caught and sentenced to a year in jail. She was paroled after 6 months. Soon after release, she was impregnated by a man she barely knew and gave birth to a baby girl, which she had to give up for adoption. In 1952, she married a Swede named Axel Johansson and had a violent 14-year marriage. In 1960, she was arrested in a brothel and was sentenced to 90 days in the Sacramento County Jail. After her release, she was arrested again, this time for vagrancy, and sentenced to another 90 days in jail. Following that, she started to get involved in miscellaneous illegal acts that over time became more serious. This activity slowed down a great deal when she found work as a nurse's aide, caring for disabled and elderly people in private homes. In a short time, she started to manage boarding houses. She divorced Johansson in 1966 and married Roberto Puente in Mexico City, a man who was 19 years her junior. Roberto had trouble staying faithful to Dorthea, and the marriage only lasted 2 years. Shortly before the end of the marriage, however, Dorthea Puente took over a 3-story, 16-bedroom care home at 2100 F Street in Sacramento, California. There she provided care and comfort to the homeless and destitute of the area. The first sign of something wrong was when neighbors noticed the odd activities of a homeless alcoholic man known only as Chief, whom Dorthea stated she had adopted and made her handyman. Dorthea had Chief dig in the basement and cart soil and rubbish away in a wheelbarrow. The basement floor was then covered with a concrete slab. Chief later took down a garage in the backyard and installed a fresh concrete slab there as well. Soon afterward, Chief mysteriously disappeared. Dorthea married for the 3rd time in 1976 to a Pedro Montalvo, who was a physically abusive alcoholic. The marriage only lasted a few months, and Dorthea started to spend time in local bars looking for older men who were receiving benefits. She forged their signatures to steal their money, but she eventually was caught and charged with 34 counts of treasury fraud. While on probation, she continued to commit the same fraud. According to California Court of Appeal records, in 1981, Dorthea began renting an upstairs apartment at 1426 F Street in downtown Sacramento. The 9 murders with which she was charged in 1990 were associated with this upstairs apartment and not her previous 16-room boarding house. In April 1982, 61-year-old Ruth Monroe began living with Puente her upstairs apartment at 1426 F Street, but soon died from an overdose of codeine and Tylenol. Dorthea told police that the woman was very depressed because her husband was terminally ill. They believed her and judged the incident a suicide. Only a few weeks later, the police were back after a 74-year-old pensioner named Malcolm McKenzie accused Dorthea of drugging him and then robbing him. She was convicted of 3 charges of theft on August 18, 1982, and sentenced to serve 5 years in jail. While in jail, she started to correspond with a 77-year-old retiree living in Oregon named Everson Gilmeth. A pen-pal friendship developed, and when Puente was released in 1985 after serving just 3 years of her sentence, he was waiting for her in a red 1980 Ford pickup. Their relationship developed quickly, and the couple was soon making wedding plans. They opened a joint bank account and paid $600 a month rent for the upstairs apartment at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. In November 1985, Dorthea hired Ismael Flores to install some wood paneling in her apartment. For his labor and an additional $800, Dorthea gave him a red 1980 Ford pickup in good condition, which she stated belonged to her boyfriend in Los Angeles, who did not need it. Dorthea then asked Flores to do one more thing: build a box 6 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet to store books and other items. She then asked Flores to transport the filled and nailed shut box to a storage depot. Flores agreed, and Dorthea joined him. On the way, however, she told him to stop while they were on Garden Highway in Sutter County and dump the box on the riverbank in an unofficial household dumping site. Puzzled, Flores questioned why, but Dorthea told him that the contents of the box were just junk. On January 1st, 1986, a fisherman spotted the box sitting about 3 feet from the bank of the river and informed police. Investigators found a badly decomposed and unidentifiable body of an elderly man inside. Dorthea, meanwhile, continued to collect Everson Gilmeth's pension and wrote letters to his family, explaining that the reason he had not contacted them was because he was ill. She also maintained a room and board business, taking in 40 new tenants. Although she was making a good profit doing this, she wanted more and therefore started to cruise bars looking for new customers. Every month, Dorthea collected all the tenants' mail before they saw it and gave them only a small amount of their money. Invariably, the tenants squandered what little money they had at the nearest bar and were picked up by police and jailed for 30 days following anonymous tips. Dorthea then pocketed the rest of the tenants' money. On November 11, 1988, police found a body buried in the lawn of 60-year-old Dorthea Puente. 7 bodies were eventually found. Dorthea was charged with a total of 9 murders, convicted of 3, and is now serving 2 life sentences. In 1998, Dorthea began corresponding with Shane Bugbee, who did an extensive interview with her over the course of several years. She began sending him various recipes, and in 2004, the book Cooking with a Serial Killer was released. It included a lengthy interview, almost 50 recipes, and various pieces of prison art sent to Bugbee by the convicted murderer. Dorthea died in prison at Chowchilla on March 27, 2011. From natural causes, she was 82. Thank you for listening to Lace Reads. Again, please comment, like, and subscribe. Until next time.